Welcome to another episode of Wood Goblin Fabrication. Today, I'm going to turn this 2D design into a fully functional slot car tabletop display model for a local store here in Los Angeles. Before I lay the track out, I need to cut my MDF base down to its final size. First and foremost, I need to get all of the tracks out of this box and figure out what I'm working with here. Before I draw out what this display will be, I need to design a functional track. I then organize every piece by type and size.
If you do not plan very carefully how your gravitational force and physics play into this, then you are not going to have a track that has any fun at all. Any mistake in one of those areas creates a situation where the car just flies off the table at 40 miles an hour and explodes into 1,000 pieces. This is the layout that we're going with. This is the one that's been approved by the client. Now what I'm going to do is take pictures of this, load it into Photoshop, and start to design what's going to go in all these blank areas. We have a whole bunch of suggestions from the client for stuff that they want, such as like a Wonderland, maybe a dino world, maybe a lake over here with a shark jumping out of it. And then once it's designed and approved, we're going to come back in and start building all of it out.
I'm going to start this process by gluing down a bunch of foam sheet scraps I have lying around, and I'll do this by using Great Stuff expanding foam. I will then carve the foam with a utility knife and a Japanese pull saw, and then I'll lay the track back down and check my terrain and repeat the process. The first stages of this are really about getting foam on the table, carving it down to size, checking the track for large gaps, spraying more expanding foam, carving it again, and repeating this process until I'm satisfied with the overall sculpt and the track lies flat and level everywhere I need it to. Pretty much everywhere you look, there's like a new bridge system of foam that has been added and sculpted. I have done a test to find out which adhesive is going to stick to this plastic and then stick to the material we put it on. And the best thing so far seems to be this Gorilla Glue, which is great. It's like an expanding plastic foam. So this is the interesting challenge, is gluing this to the table and installing it without interfering with the electricity of the table. Off camera, I mixed together white glue, plaster, and some water, and using little strips of paper, I created almost like a papier-mâché surface to make everything uniform, create a solid foundation, and cover the foam underneath. I did this for two reasons. One, to turn this foam sculpture into a uniform, solid structure, and to prepare the entire model for a shellac coating to help protect the sculpt forever. Even after this process, I still discovered more areas that needed to be re-sculpted with foam and a little bit of free-form sculpting epoxy to give the track a uniform surface to operate on. Using Great Stuff expanding foam, I created this tunnel on the left side of the table. I started with a basic wooden frame and covered this area of the table with plastic wrap so the expanding foam would not stick to the paper surface, allowing me to create a perfectly uniform shape that could be easily lifted off the table. This is just the beginning of a rough sculpt, but you can already see how useful this material is when used in this way. Once I'm happy with the sculpt, I will put this tunnel through the same process and make it as solid as possible. And then I will embed magnets in the table and the tunnel, so it always locks into the perfect position. Once all the papier-mâché was dry, I covered the entire surface in a layer of shellac. Once that was dry, I mixed together some sand, plaster, and white glue and stippled it all over the surface of the terrain. I wanted the lake area to have a sandy texture and really give Dino World and the volcano a nice textured surface that will really come in nicely when it's painted. As you can see here, I built out the interior of the tunnel with some wood and glue to make it feel like this tunnel was carved out specifically for the slot car track. I also began to sculpt the haunted tree character that will sit in the back right corner. I started with a small manzanita tree and added textured characteristics using sculptable epoxy. Since we will be installing lights in these carved out areas, I drilled out holes underneath the track surface and filled them with styrene tubes to protect the foam on the inside from any heat. A few days later, I textured the remaining areas of the terrain and painted the inside of the volcano cracks a bright orange. Figuring out how this volcano was going to work was one of the toughest things I've worked on up to this point. We needed to embed LED strips into these cracks and then cover them with a thin sheet of acrylic. This presented all sorts of different challenges and lots of interesting problems to try and solve. I took a sheet of acrylic and tried some different texturing tests to see what would look best on the surface. Because I am not an electrician, I hired my friend Warren to come over and help me solve this immensely complicated wiring system.
So there's 7 main lines that I'll have to all loop together, but those are all wired at this point, so it'll be kind of a quick thing to get them all wired together for power, but that's probably the last thing I'll do. And then in this first tier, everything that needed a connection for daisy chaining has already happened. So that part is done, including the ring around to one of these leads.
While Warren figured out how to wire all these LEDs together, I put a couple coats of paint down and glued down some faux fur for the haunted area. In addition, I painted the haunted tree character with a base coat of primer and began to construct a haunted barn. And before you know it, Warren has wired the entire volcano, giving this tabletop display an incredibly exciting new atmosphere. After the electricity was finished, and all of the LEDs and wires were protected with acrylic, it was time to add some layers of paint and texture.
These are now solid, and they are protected by acrylic and glue. So we've got this really nice line here. I get to do some detail work with these globs of glue, which once the whole thing is done, I'll do some more actual patterns and detail in the glue. But yeah, all of these have acrylic that's protecting the stuff underneath, and then it's basically covered in glue.
One of the reasons I added paint over the LED strips was to help bring down the brightness and also provide a finished look when the LEDs are off. And although it can be difficult to see it on camera, the surface texture really makes it look like the lava is moving. Off camera, I finished sculpting and painted our little haunted barn, and I have to say, I think it is my favorite part of this entire display. I also painted our haunted tree character and installed a threaded rod in the bottom so you can attach him to the table and lock him into place from underneath. As part of this display, I needed to make a bright and colorful cityscape with lights in all of the windows. We started with base pastel colors and then began adding darker colors for shadows and depth. Off camera, I hired my friend Anwardi to build our tribute to the Ben Franklin Bridge as the centerpiece of this display.
Alright, so stuff is coming together. This is the model all assembled, minus just a handful of things that still need to get done. We've got Dino Town over here. All of this is flocked and decorated, and then there's this large piece here that basically allows these cables to get hidden, and it's weighted down so that sits there. And then you come up this way, and we've got our volcano, which I will turn on for you right now, so you can see how this looks in the overall set. This is our tribute to the Ben Franklin Bridge, sitting in our lake of marbles. This was flocked and cleaned up, and same as always, it just lifts off with magnets, and we've got some nice flocking on there, so you can see the track, and then this just puts back on.
After the cityscape was painted, it was time to install the acrylic on the inside and the lighting.
I'm on expert right now because you have to get the right speed to go over that loop, so I'm going to do a couple runs here to try and get the thing to go through the whole thing without crashing. Off the top! Alright, you know what? We're missing something. Let me try something real quick. Alright, still crashing. It takes some real skill to get it to go through. So, you go a little slow through these areas, it goes all the way around, you speed it up through the loop, and then woo, yeah! Derailed. Alright, we made it all the way through at least once before it stopped. But for the most part, It's working real well. It's going through, zooming through. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Derailed right there. You know, just gotta control it and learn the track. Oh! Yeah, if you're not going fast enough, it's not gonna make that loop. Either way, I think it would be smart to buy a whole bunch of these because when they fly off at top speed, they can shatter.
Voila! Finally, I installed the lighting behind the cityscape and mounted it outside my shop to test the hanging system. And this is the final display, all lit up and decorated. Because the owner hasn't officially released the clothing line that will accompany this display, I have chosen to only show the model completed on its own. Here are some of the close-ups of the display, all set up and ready to go. I absolutely loved building every part of this display, from the handcrafted elements to the miniature trees, to the glowing volcano, to the illuminated city. All of it has a level of interactivity that I don't usually get to create with stop-motion animation. I hope you enjoyed seeing this display come together, and if you like this video, please check out the rest of my channel.